Hello, this is Ben Moore, Finance Manager for the Office of Community Assistance, and this video is an overview of the 2021 CSBG grant and budget submission process. In order to be eligible for grants in Program Year 21, grantees must register and pre-qualify on the GATA grantee portal at www.grants.illinois.gov. This includes completion of PY or FY21 internal control questionnaire or the ICQ. Grantees must also complete the 2021 CSBG program risk assessment questionnaire or the PRAC, and there's the address to reach that survey there, and that link has also been emailed to grantees. Grantees must then make an FY21 indirect cost rate election on the CARS system, and keep in mind that this is required even if you're not planning on claiming indirect cost for 21. You need to at least elect an option, and that if you're not claiming indirect cost, then your option would be that you choose not to claim them. Grantees need to complete and upload the following documents to the STARS document library by September 30th, 2020. The documents that you need to complete and upload are the Uniform Application for State Grant Assistance, the completed Uniform Grant Budget Template Spreadsheet, or the GATA Budget Spreadsheet. You need to submit the signed and dated budget certification tab from that spreadsheet, and that needs to be uploaded as a PDF document. You also need to provide supporting documentation for any direct cost budgeted, if indeed you do include indirect costs. Additional documents that are required to be uploaded are the DCO Conflict of Interest Disclosure Form and the DCO Mandatory Disclosure Form. Additionally, there are other CSBG program-specific documents that are addressed in a separate video in this series. Again, all required documents have been emailed to grantees. When you're uploading the documents, please include your grant number at the beginning of each document file name. That helps both you as the grantee and the grant manager identify those documents and what grantee they belong to easily. A couple GATA process reminders. Again, grantees must be pre-qualified on the GATA portal to receive 21 funding. One thing that you should definitely do is verify that your FEEN and your DUNS in the GATA portal match what you have on our systems, our GRS system. Because GRS includes an edit that will prevent any transactions if the FEEN-DUNS combination pre-qualified on the GATA website does not match what we have on our systems. And the impact for this is that it could prevent you from submitting cash requests, or from new grants being processed or modifications being processed on existing grants. So please check that. If you're trying to submit a cash request and you get this error that says FEEN not GATA pre-qualified, not processed, there's probably an issue on your status on the GATA grantee portal. I've got a screenshot here of where you can look. When you look at your GATA portal, the pre-qualification information section, it provides the standing for each of these items that are required, and if it says anything but good standing, you know that's probably the area that's causing the problem and potentially creating a FEEN lock for your agency. So please check there if you have any issues. Couple important GATA process reminders, again, some additional ones. You need to ensure that your indirect cost selection has been made in the CARS system. Like I said, even if you're not going to claim any indirect costs, you have to make that election on the CARS system, because DCO accounting will not process your grant if you have not made a current year election. So after you've successfully been pre-qualified, you will be directed via email to complete a web-based internal control questionnaire and ICQ. Remember that the ICQ is for your whole organization, not just how you operate the CSBG grant. So you need to ensure that you clearly understand the questions when responding so that you provide a correct answer. Responses that indicate high risk will result in special conditions on your grant. So please take your time and try to be as accurate as possible when completing the ICQ. As I mentioned also, you need to submit a PRAC for CSBG that can be accessed at the URL that was provided in an earlier slide. So you need to when completing the PRAC, ensure that the responses to the questions on the PRAC accurately reflect how you operate CSPG in this case, and not necessarily your organization as a whole. So there may be different operations that you have as pertaining to operation of the CSPG grant in particular, as opposed to your whole organization. So keep that in mind when responding. Again, incorrectly responding to a PRAC question may result in a special condition on your grant, similar to the ICQ. The 2021 CSPG grant budgets will follow the GATA requirements. It's similar to the process that we used for the 2020 CSPG grants. The budgets will be submitted using the GATA budget template spreadsheet rather than the STARS budget system, and there really are no major changes in the other GATA documents for 2021. Your grantee allocation should have been emailed to you for use in completing the GATA budget spreadsheet. So on the spreadsheet, you must provide specific itemization of costs in each category or tab of the spreadsheet. As far as how the spreadsheet is laid out, there is a standard GATA budget template that just has line items 1 through 17, but in order to make the entry a little more clear for OCA grantees, we have customized it. We've made the GRS budget line item numbers correspond with the line items on the spreadsheet, so it's more clear what you're budgeting in correspondence to the GRS line items. We have color-coded the spreadsheet to correspond to each category, so all the program support items are the same color, same thing with client benefits and administration, and we've also included subtotals by each of these categories. There is a budget checker on the summary page of the budget spreadsheet that will help to ensure that you don't exceed your allocation or that you don't exceed the allowed 16% admin. And completion of the budget checker portion of the spreadsheet is required, and you need to make sure that there are no alerts on that budget checker before you submit your budget. As far as the individual budget category tabs, they are also color-coded to correspond to the OCA budget categories that we mentioned. The tabs for categories that make up program support are clearly marked as such. Same thing with the categories that are for administration. And all the totals in the spreadsheet are rounded, and hopefully that will eliminate some of the rounding errors that we've encountered in the past. Here's a quick overview of what the Section A or the summary sheet of the spreadsheet looks like. Again, here are all the different budget categories. And those, you do not complete those on this tab. You go to the individual tab, complete how you were going to allocate money to each of these budget line items. They will then populate into this total. To the right is the budget checker that I mentioned, and there are instructions in this box up top. You were to complete just the yellow highlighted fields on this screen. You enter your total allowed CSPG allocation. That will help ensure that you don't overexpend your budget when you're completing the individual tabs. So some guidelines for submitting your budget. Again, your allocation, the 2021 CSPG grant allocation to your agency should be utilized when completing this budget spreadsheet. Based on your agency's allocation, enter the detailed costs you wish to budget for each category on the individual tabs, and that will detail how you're going to utilize the funding. So again, do not enter budgeted amounts in the Section A tab that we just went over, because this tab contains formulas that draw the amounts from the other individual tabs. The spreadsheet is also locked so that you should only be able to make data entry selections in the fields that you're required to complete. So as far as utilizing the formulas on each of the budget tabs, although the data entry grids in some of the individual tabs may not be formatted exactly for all the different varieties of costs you have as far as what column headings they are, please make any necessary adjustments to accurately calculate the total cost you intend for each line item entered. And in that case specifically, it's critical that you add explanations in the narrative section for any adjustments that you've made to what the column headings are intended to be, or assumptions you made in entering your costs. So most of the tabs have formulas provided in the final cost column to the far right. These must be utilized if they're present. So just enter in the fields that are available and don't hard code over the formulas. Otherwise, it'll probably get kicked back to you. You'll have to resubmit it. As far as the narratives, in the narrative section of each cost category tab, please provide very clear comments regarding how the costs were calculated or any other information that may help support the cost you entered. In all cases, if costs are direct and shared between different grant programs, you must explain how the costs were allocated across the grants. For the indirect cost election, the grantees are required to provide information regarding indirect costs on the tab that is the section A-ICA, which stands for indirect cost information. So on that tab, there's some information you'll need to enter, and that will be addressed in a separate video. So as far as the process, when you submit your budget or when you prepare your budget, the budget checker, again, on section A that we looked at, you need to fill this out first before you complete the individual budget tabs. Because the budget feature, it will assist you in verifying that the maximum allowed budget allocation is not exceeded, as I also mentioned, that it will help you make sure you don't exceed your 16% allowed administration. And there are step-by-step instructions, as I indicated, above the budget checker to help you complete that. And again, if there are any alerts that show up on that budget checker, you need to get those resolved before you submit your budget. As far as the organization of the budget categories, again, there's a program support category, and all those budget line items start with 100. And here are the separate categories. There's personnel, fringe benefits, travel, equipment, supplies, contractual services, consultant, occupancy, rent, and then there's occupancy utilities. And these are two separate line items on this spreadsheet, but they are one line item on GRS. They all roll up into the line 109 on GRS, but on this spreadsheet, it's broken out into rent and utilities, A and B. There's telecom, there's training and education, and there's miscellaneous. The miscellaneous tab should only be used if any of the other categories are not appropriate. So please make sure that you try to fit a cost in an appropriate category, specific category, before just resorting to putting it into miscellaneous. As far as client assistance, these are the 200 series line items, and there are 3 separate budget line item categories for client assistance in this grant. There's direct client assistance, 201, indirect 202, and scholarships 203. And there is a separate video that details a little more clearly how to complete that tab for client assistance on the spreadsheet. Similar to program support, the administrative costs category does have the separate breakouts from 01 to 014. They just start with 300 instead of 100. And you need to take special caution when completing this budget spreadsheet to make sure that costs that are only allowed to be entered into the direct administrative category are properly categorized. You can't budget a cost that's only allowed in admin. You cannot budget that in a program support category. So please pay special attention there. And again, remember that 16% administration is the maximum allowed. So make sure that you stay under that amount. The indirect costs are budget line item 317. The indirect cost should be entered on the indirect cost tab, which will transfer to line 317 of the section A, just like the rest of the tabs. They transfer to the summary on tab A. If you elected to be reimbursed for indirect costs, you must provide the required documentation to support the rate. And again, details regarding how to complete the indirect cost tab and the documents necessary to accompany that will be addressed in a separate video. All the supporting documentation, if you do claim indirect costs, must be uploaded to the STARS document library along with the rest of your grant application documents. So signatures while working remotely, preferably original signatures should be included on all the grants, but given the current circumstances of many grantee staff working remotely due to COVID-19, DCO is accepting email authorization of stamped or electronic signatures. again, this is a last resort. If you can get an original signature, it's preferred, and it actually will help get your grant processed a little more quickly. So the process, if you do need to use an electronic signature, if an electronic signature is used, these steps must be followed. So first, you need to attach the stamp or electronic signature on the grant document. Secondly, you need to have the authorized signatory send an email to OCA. Typically, this will be the executive director or whoever typically signs the grants. They need to send an email to OCA Fiscal. And here's some suggested language. Say something like, I certify that this person, the authorized signatory, so you would I certify that I am, put your name in there, the authorized signatory for this grant, and that I approve the grant establishment for grant number, and you would put your specific grant number there. If you wish to assign an authorized designee, you need to send an email including the following language, and you could include these both in the same email. You would say, I also certify my desire to establish the person that you want to designate as designee to this grant. So that's the process. If you are unable to get an original signature, again, we encourage that you try to get the original signature. It saves these extra steps, but if necessary, here's the cleanest way to do it. So outside of the electronic signature process, there is the process of establishing an authorized designee. First of all, it's optional. Just the authorized signatory can just be one person and leave it that way. But if they do wish to designate someone who can also be authorized to sign a grant, there are two options. The first option is when submitting your grant application, you can complete the authorized designee section of the grant document at the time that the grantee director signs it. So just as part of your grant package, you assign a designee, and that person is then authorized to sign it. If you don't do it at the time of establishment of the grant, after it has been executed, after the grant's been executed, then you can complete a separate notification of additional authorized designee form at any time and submit that. Now, a special note is each authorized designee must be designated for each specific program year for each separate grant. So if somebody was designated for the 2020 grant, that doesn't automatically carry over. You need to make sure and include that in your submission of this grant or submit a separate designee form. So the budget review and grant processing, here are the steps that happen. So OCA staff and DCO accounting, they review and approve the uniform budget for each grant. That's the budget template, and that typically takes the longest amount of time. So the more responsive you are to any change requests, the better, and the more quickly your grant will get processed. So once the uniform budget, the budget template is approved, an automated email will be sent from the GATA portal regarding a pending notice of state award. We call that the NOSA, which the grantees must electronically accept before we can continue to process your grant. So you get an email with this NOSA, you need to review it, accept it, before we can process your grant. So once you do accept that NOSA, then we'll email you the notice of grant award, which is effectively the grant document for you to sign and get back into us, and we can complete the processing of the grant. So that really concludes the grant budget and grant application process overview. We do have separate videos, as I've mentioned a few times, as guides to completing the individual cost tabs on all the categories of budget. So I encourage you to watch any of the other videos that may help you guide you through submitting the budget. Thanks for watching.